My mom literally pulled me aside at a family dinner and told me I was too successful, and that my life was making my unemployed, golden child brother feel bad about himself. When I refused to pretend I was a failure just to protect his fragile ego, she retaliated by calling my company's HR department with a 3-page list of fabricated lies to get me fired. Spoiler alert, it completely backfired, and it ended up costing her everything. Hey Reddit, I'm a 29-year-old guy working as a senior data analyst for a mid-sized tech logistics company in Seattle. There is absolutely nothing crazy fancy about my background. I didn't have a trust fund, I didn't have connections, and I certainly didn't have a safety net. I worked my way up from being a completely broke junior analyst, straight out of college. My younger brother, Leo, who is 26, well, he exists. That's about the most impressive thing I can possibly say about him without outright lying. To understand the absolute insanity of what my mother did to me, you have to let me paint you a picture of how things have always been in my family. I am the oldest kid. From day one, I was expected to be responsible, mature, and basically raise myself while my parents focused every single ounce of their energy, time, and finances on Leo. He was the golden child, the baby, the one who could do absolutely no wrong, even when he was actively, maliciously doing wrong. When we were kids, the double standards were suffocating. I would get screamed at and grounded for a week for leaving a single pair of shoes in the hallway. Leo would literally trash the entire living room, break expensive vases, draw on the walls, and my parents would just smile, take a picture, and say he was expressing his boundless creativity. I was given a strict chore chart starting at age 7. I was doing my own laundry, mowing the lawn, and washing dishes. Leo didn't even know how to operate a washing machine until he was 18, and even then, my mom still did it for him. Birthdays were an absolute joke. For my 16th birthday, I got a used graphing calculator for school and a pack of generic brand socks. I remember opening it and trying to force a smile while my parents told me it was practical. When Leo turned 14, 2 years later, he woke up to a brand new, $2,500 dirt bike with a giant red bow on it, followed by a massive party where my parents rented a bouncy castle and catered barbecue for 40 of his friends. But you know what? Very early on, I learned to completely stop caring about the unfairness. I realized that getting angry was a waste of energy. I just put my head down, built a wall around my emotions, and focused entirely on what I could control, my future. I studied relentlessly. I got straight A's. I worked part-time jobs at a local grocery store starting the exact day I turned 16, and I saved absolutely every single penny in a bank account my parents couldn't access. My parents never helped me financially after I turned 18, not one dime. Not with college, not with my first apartment, nothing. I went to a solid, in-state public university on a partial academic scholarship that I earned entirely by myself. I worked 30 hours a week as a barista, pulling opening shifts at 4:30 a.m. before my 9 a.m. classes. I lived on bulk rice, frozen vegetables, and sheer willpower. I graduated in exactly 4 years with a degree in data analytics and a 3.8 gigapascals. Meanwhile, Leo's college experience was a fully funded vacation. My parents paid for him to go to an expensive, out-of-state private college. They bought him a brand new Honda Civic as a going-away present. They covered his tuition, his off-campus luxury apartment rent, and gave him a monthly allowance so he wouldn't have to stress about working. He changed his major 5 different times from business, to philosophy, to art history, and finally settling on communications. It took him 6.5 years to graduate. He finished with a dismal 2.1 gigapascals. His graduation party had over 100 people, a live band, and an open bar. My graduation celebration was a quick lunch at a local diner where my dad literally made me pay for my own milkshake. After college, I started at my current company as a junior analyst making $48,000 a year. I lived in a crappy, 400 square foot studio apartment above a noisy laundromat where the washing machines literally shook my bed at night. I drove a beat-up Toyota Corolla with a missing hubcap, ate ramen most nights, and saved aggressively. Leo, on the other hand, bounced around between random retail and entry-level marketing jobs, quitting half of them because the managers didn't respect his creative vision. He still lived at home rent-free, driving the car my parents bought him, while they paid his phone bill and car insurance. I worked my absolute tail off. I was the first one in the office, and the last one to leave. I took on extra projects, taught myself advanced Python coding on the weekends, and optimized supply chain algorithms that saved my company hundreds of thousands of dollars. I got promoted after 2 years to analyst, and then 3 years after that to senior analyst. My salary jumped to $85,000. I finally moved out of that terrible studio into a beautiful, modern 2-bedroom apartment in a nice complex with a gym and a pool. I bought myself a 3-year-old Hyundai Sonata that actually had working air conditioning and Bluetooth. I started building up a massive savings account, nothing extravagant, but I was finally living like a normal, successful adult instead of a desperately broke college kid. Leo was still at home at age 26, working 12 hours a week at a boutique sneaker store, making maybe $18,000 a year. My parents didn't care. They weren't charging him a cent of rent. They were basically completely supporting a grown man who had zero ambition, no drive, and spent 90% of his waking hours playing competitive video games and hanging out with his equally unmotivated buddies on Discord. Last year, I achieved my biggest milestone yet. I bought my first house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman-style place in a quiet, decent suburb about 25 minutes from my office. It needed a little bit of cosmetic updating, but the bones were incredibly solid. I saved up the $80,000 down payment entirely by myself. I got pre-approved for the mortgage, negotiated the closing costs, and handled the entire grueling process completely solo. It was huge for me. It was the first major adult milestone I had achieved completely on my own, without a single shred of help from anyone. When I called my parents to tell them I had officially closed on the house and had the keys in my hand, their response was lukewarm at best. My mom sighed into the phone and said, "That's nice, honey." She said it with the exact same tone you'd use if I told her I bought a new brand of paper towels. My dad immediately chimed in and asked, in this incredibly condescending tone, "Are you absolutely sure you aren't in over your head? Mortgages are for adults. Zero congratulations, zero excitement, zero pride in what their eldest son had accomplished through blood, sweat, and tears." But you know what really stung? What really twisted the knife? 2 days after I told them about buying my house, Leo casually mentioned at breakfast that he was thinking about maybe looking at apartments eventually. Someday in the future. My parents absolutely fell all over themselves. They offered to pay his first and last month's rent. They offered to co-sign the lease. They talked endlessly about how exciting it would be for him to finally have his own bachelor pad and how they would take him furniture shopping. He hadn't even looked at a single Zillow listing. He was literally just daydreaming out loud, and they were ready to finance his entire existence. The absolute tipping point came 3 months ago at one of our mandatory family dinners. We do these once a month at my parents' house. They are usually excruciatingly boring. We eat whatever dried chicken my mom made, make shallow small talk about the weather, and I always leave the exact second it becomes socially acceptable to do so. This particular dinner, my Uncle Marcus was there with my Aunt Helen. Uncle Marcus is my dad's brother, but unlike my dad, he's actually a grounded, rational human being. During dinner, Uncle Marcus turned to me and asked how work was going. I smiled and mentioned that I had just gotten another raise and a title bump, and was now making $105,000 a year. I wasn't bragging. I didn't bring it up out of nowhere. I was just answering his direct question honestly. My uncle was genuinely impressed. He asked more questions about my job, what my day-to-day looked like, and what the tech industry was like right now. It was completely normal, healthy conversation. I talked about a massive data migration project I had just successfully led that saved the company a huge amount in server costs. I mentioned how I had been getting amazing feedback from the VP of operations, and how I was being heavily considered for a data manager position that was opening up next year. Leo sat there the entire time looking like someone had just run over his dog. His face was bright red. He got quieter and quieter, violently stabbing his dried chicken with his fork, barely eating a bite, and aggressively scrolling on his phone under the table. My parents noticed immediately. They kept shooting me these toxic, warning glares across the table, acting as if I was committing a federal crime by having a completely normal conversation about my career with my own uncle. After dinner, Uncle Marcus and Aunt Helen left. I was standing in the dining room, quietly gathering the plates to help clear the table, when my mom marched over and grabbed my arm. She had this deadly serious, furious expression that immediately put my guard up. "Can I talk to you in the living room for a minute?" she demanded. My dad and Leo stayed in the kitchen, purposely looking away. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, genuinely confused about what I could have possibly done wrong. My mom sat down on the sofa, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me like I was a massive disappointment. "I need you to understand something. The way you talked about your job tonight." It made Leo feel really, really bad about himself. I stared at her for 3 solid seconds before I actually let out a laugh, because I legitimately thought she was making a dark joke, but she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were ice cold. "Wait, you're serious right now?" I asked, dropping the plates back onto the table. "Yes, I am completely serious," she hissed. "Leo is going through a very hard time right now trying to figure out his career path and his purpose in life. He does not need to sit here and listen to you boast about how successful you are. It just makes him feel infinitely worse about where he is in life. It's incredibly toxic of you." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Mom, he asked me to pass the salt. Uncle Marcus asked me about work. I was literally just answering his question. I didn't bring it up." "Mom, you could have been significantly more modest about it," she snapped. "You didn't need to go into so much exhaustive detail about your salary, your raise, and your promotion prospects. You know perfectly well that Leo is struggling." Leo is struggling because he works 12 hours a week at a sneaker store and lives in your house for free at 26 years old. I said, my voice dropping an octave as I tried to keep my temper in check. He games until 4 a.m. every night. That is not my fault, and I am not responsible for his choices. That is exactly the kind of arrogant attitude I'm talking about, my mom said, her voice getting shrill and hysterical. You need to be vastly more sensitive to your brother's emotional state. Not everyone is as ruthlessly career-driven as you are. Some people have creative souls and need more time to find their path. He's 26, Mom. He has had nearly a decade to find his path. And I am absolutely not going to apologize for working hard, sacrificing my 20s, and being successful. She let out this massive, theatrical sigh, acting like I was a rebellious teenager. I am just asking you to tone it down. When we have family gatherings, hide it. Be less visible. You do not need to constantly remind everyone how well you're doing. It creates immense tension in this house. Creates tension? Me answering questions truthfully creates tension? I asked, my voice finally rising. You are making your brother feel inadequate, she said flatly, crossing her arms. I am asking you, as his mother, to be more considerate. Hide your accomplishments. Is that really so much to ask to keep the peace in this family? I stood there, completely paralyzed, processing what my own mother was actually saying to my face. She was demanding that I actively hide my success, pretend I was doing poorly, and shrink myself down just to protect my adult brother's incredibly fragile ego. She didn't want to encourage him to do better. She didn't want to push him to get his life together. She just wanted to guarantee that I didn't remind him that he was going absolutely nowhere by being visibly successful myself. So, what exactly do you want me to do? I asked, my tone dripping with venom. Lie about my job? Pretend I work the night shift at a gas station? Should I quit and work part-time retail with Leo so he doesn't feel threatened? Stop being so incredibly dramatic. My mom snapped, standing up to meet my gaze. I am just asking for some discretion, some humility. You don't need to constantly rub your money in our faces. Lest, Asti. I mentioned it once. Because Uncle Marcus directly asked me. That is not rubbing it in anyone's face. Well, it was highly uncomfortable for Leo, and I expect you to be far more thoughtful going forward, or you won't be welcome at these dinners. I grabbed my jacket off the chair. I'm going to head out. My dad finally shuffled out from the kitchen. You're leaving already? We haven't even had the pie yet. Yeah, I think I'm completely done here, I said, shoving my arms into my jacket. Mom just informed me that I'm too successful and my existence hurts Leo's feelings. So, I should probably go hide in a cave from now on. Real supportive family dynamic we have going on here. My dad's face did this pathetic, cowardly twitch. I could tell instantly that he knew exactly what my mom had said, that they had likely planned this confrontation together, but he didn't have the spine to admit it out loud. Your mother is just trying to keep the peace, son. By asking me to pretend I'm a failure? That's your version of keeping the peace? Nobody is asking you to pretend anything. My dad lied, refusing to make eye contact. We just think it would be vastly better for everyone's mental health if you were a little less vocal about your career trajectory. Right, got it. Message received loud and clear. I headed for the front door. As I walked past the kitchen, Leo was leaning against the counter, looking smug as hell. He had a literal smirk on his face. He knew exactly what had just gone down in the living room, and he was eating it up. He loved seeing me get scolded for doing better than him. See you later, loser, I said directly to Leo, and slammed the front door behind me. I sat in my car in their driveway for a full 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, processing how deeply messed up that entire interaction was. My parents weren't proud of me. They didn't love my success. They saw my hard work as a toxic problem that needed to be eradicated. So, I did exactly what I do best. I channeled all of that rage into my work. The very next week, I volunteered to lead 3 more high-profile data pipeline projects at the company. I stayed late every single night. I came in on Saturdays. I built interactive dashboards for the executive team that completely revolutionized how they tracked quarterly logistics. I started networking aggressively, positioning myself undeniably for that management role. At the next monthly family dinner, I didn't hold back. When my dad asked how the weather was, I pivoted the conversation and talked loudly and proudly about every single massive project I was leading at work. My mom's face got tighter and tighter with every word, her lips pursed so hard they turned white. Leo literally threw his napkin on his plate and excused himself halfway through the meal, stomping up the stairs to his room like a toddler. My dad tried to change the subject 3 separate times, and I just kept bringing it back to my career. 2 weeks after that dinner, my hard work paid off in a massive way. I was officially called into the VP's office and offered the promotion. My new title was Data Analytics Manager, and my salary made a staggering jump to $125,000 a year, plus performance bonuses. I was absolutely over the moon. This was everything I had sacrificed my 20s for. I called my parents to tell them. I knew they wouldn't care, but I wanted to force them to hear it. My mom answered the phone. Hey mom, I got some massive news today. I officially got promoted to manager. Huge raise, too. I'm running my own team now. There was a deafening, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing. Mom? That's good, honey, she finally forced out, her voice dripping with ice. Is Dad there? I wanted to tell him, too. He's busy in the garage right now. I'll let him know eventually. Okay, well, yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's a massive step up for my career. More dead silence. Alright, well, I have a celebration dinner to get to, just wanted to share the news. Okay, bye. She hung up the phone before I could even say goodbye back. That was my own mother's reaction to the biggest, most life-changing career achievement of my life. That's good, honey, followed by hanging up on me. Whatever. I didn't need their validation. I never had, and I wasn't going to start needing it now. To celebrate my promotion, I decided to finally treat myself. I traded in my Hyundai and leased a brand new, stunningly sleek BMW 3 Series. It was gorgeous, fast, and a symbol of everything I had built for myself. The following month at the family dinner, I made sure to park the BMW right in the center of their driveway. Leo was outside taking out the trash when I pulled up. The look of pure, unfiltered jealousy and hatred on his face when he saw the BMW badge was absolutely priceless. He dropped the trash bag on the lawn and stormed inside without saying a word to me. Dinner that night was a war zone of silence. Nobody asked me about work. Nobody asked about the brand new luxury car sitting in the driveway. Uncle Marcus wasn't there to break the ice, so we just sat in agonizing quiet. After dinner, I was putting my jacket on to leave when my mom aggressively followed me outside, right up to the driver's side door of my BMW. We need to talk, she demanded, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face red with fury. About what? I asked, unlocking the car so the headlights flashed brightly in her face. This needs to stop immediately, she said, gesturing wildly at my car and, apparently, my entire existence. You are purposely rubbing your success in Leo's face. It is cruel and malicious. I drove a car to a dinner, Mom. How is that rubbing it in his face? You knew he would see it. You knew it would make him feel pathetic. You could have parked down the street, or you could have taken an Uber. You didn't need to parade this monstrosity in our driveway. I actually laughed out loud, a deep, genuine belly laugh. You want me to park down the street so my brother doesn't feel bad about his own life choices? Are you actually hearing the words coming out of your mouth right now? I am hearing a son who has become incredibly arrogant, narcissistic, and inconsiderate. She screamed back at me. You are not the sweet boy I raised. The boy you raised? Mom, you barely raised me. You were vastly too busy making sure Leo had a dirt bike and catered parties while I was buying my own socks and working at a grocery store at 16. I scraped by on my own. I worked for every single thing I have. Every dollar, every promotion, this house, this car. And now that I am finally doing incredibly well, you want me to hide in the shadows because Leo can't handle the fact that he has accomplished absolutely nothing in 26 years? Her face went from red to a dangerous shade of purple. How dare you speak to your mother that way? I'm speaking the truth. Leo is going absolutely nowhere because you and Dad have enabled his pathetic behavior his entire life. He has no ambition, no work ethic, and no drive because you have handed him everything on a silver platter and expected nothing in return. That is your fault, not mine. Leo is going through a very delicate transition period, she yelled, her voice shaking with rage. He is trying to figure things out. The absolute last thing he needs is his arrogant brother flaunting his wealth every single chance he gets to destroy his confidence. I'm not flaunting anything, Mom, I am literally just living my life. If my normal life makes Leo that uncomfortable, he should probably get off his gaming chair and do something about his own life instead of expecting the world to cater to his mediocrity. You have changed, she said quietly, her eyes filled with genuine disgust. You used to be humble. I used to be invisible. I corrected her, staring right into her eyes. There is a massive difference. I got in my BMW, started the engine so it roared to life, and backed out of the driveway, leaving her standing there in the exhaust. I thought that was the end of it. I figured we would just have a Cold War for a few months. I vastly underestimated how insane and vindictive my mother truly was. 2 days later, on a random Tuesday morning, I got called into my boss's office before I had even poured my first cup of coffee. His name is David, the VP of Operations. He is usually a very laid-back, professional guy, but when I walked into his office, he looked incredibly uncomfortable and tense. Close the door and take a seat, David said, not looking up from his laptop. I sat down, my heart starting to race a little. This did not feel like a normal project check-in. David leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and sighed deeply. I received a very, very strange phone call yesterday afternoon. Okay? I asked, my stomach dropping. It was from a woman claiming to be your mother. The blood instantly drained from my face. The room started to spin slightly. What? She called the main corporate line, demanded to speak to upper management, and got transferred around until she finally reached my desk. She said she was your mother, and she had some very severe, urgent concerns she needed to discuss about your behavior at this company. I literally could not believe the words entering my ears. David, what kind of concerns? David looked at me with a mix of pity and confusion. She claimed that you have been bragging to your family members about stealing credit for other people's work. She said you have been lying about your technical skills, fabricating your data reports, and that we, as a company, should know that you are not actually responsible for the success you've been claiming. I felt like I had been violently punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe for a second. David, that is completely, 100% false. Every single thing I've worked on is documented in our Git repositories. Every project, every dashboard, every line of code, you know that. You've personally reviewed my work. I know, David said quickly, holding up a hand. That's exactly why this was such a bizarre and alarming call. But she didn't stop there. She also claimed that you have been verbally harassing your junior coworkers, creating a highly toxic and hostile work environment, and threatening people who try to expose you. My jaw practically hit the floor. Harassing coworkers? Are you kidding me? We haven't had a single complaint. My team literally just bought me a cake last week for my promotion. I know, David repeated. Obviously, I know it's not true. If anything, your team's peer reviews were the highest in the entire department. But I need you to understand the severity of this. Your mother called your workplace to accuse you of corporate fraud and workplace harassment. I am so incredibly sorry, David, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of utter humiliation and blinding rage. I can't believe she did this. Why would she do this? David shrugged helplessly. I was hoping you could tell me. She sounded incredibly convincing. She said she was deeply concerned that our company was being deceived by a sociopath. Look, I told her point blank that we had absolutely no concerns regarding your stellar performance, and that all our employees' work is rigorously documented. She did not seem satisfied with that answer. She got very aggressive and implied she might escalate this to human resources or the executive board. I wanted to give you a heads up in case she tries to contact our HR department. I will handle this immediately, I said, standing up, my hands balled into fists. This is completely out of line. It will never happen again. Do you need to take the rest of the day off to deal with this family situation? David asked gently. No, I said, my voice ice cold. I have a pipeline deployment at 11 a.m. I'm fine. For what it's worth, David said as I opened the door, you are one of the strongest, most brilliant performers we have ever had. Whatever insane family drama is happening outside these walls, it doesn't reflect on your work here. We know who you are. I thanked him and walked back to my desk, completely numb. I stared at my monitors for an hour, not seeing a single line of code. My own mother had actually called my workplace. She had tried to destroy my career, my livelihood, and my reputation, all to get me fired. Why? So I would be unemployed and miserable, just like Leo, and he wouldn't have to feel bad about himself anymore. This wasn't just asking me to tone down my success. This was active, malicious, calculated sabotage. I grabbed my phone, walked out of the building, and marched into the empty parking garage. I called her. She answered on the second ring, sounding completely normal. Hi, honey. Did you call my boss? I cut her off, my voice a low, dangerous growl. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Answer me right now. Did you call my vice president and tell him I was committing fraud and harassing my team? I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but her voice wavered pathetically. Do not lie to me. I screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls of the garage. My boss just pulled me into his office and told me every single insane, psychotic lie you fed him, about how I steal credit, about how I harass people. You actively tried to get me fired. I didn't try to get you fired, she yelled back, instantly going on the defensive. I just thought your management team needed to know the absolute truth about how you really act behind closed doors. The truth? What truth? That I work 60 hours a week and do my job flawlessly? That is the only truth. Everything I have accomplished is real and heavily documented. You tried to sabotage my entire life with fabricated, malicious lies. You have been absolutely insufferable lately. She screeched into the phone, constantly bragging, showing off that disgusting luxury car, purposefully making Leo feel suicidal and terrible about his life. Someone needed to knock you off your high horse and teach you a lesson in humility. So, you tried to destroy my career? That was your brilliant solution? Call my employer with made-up accusations that could have ruined my life? They weren't made up. You have been taking credit for things you didn't do, I know it. Stop lying, I roared. You don't know a single damn thing about my work. You don't even know what data analytics means. You just decided that because your precious, golden child Leo is a pathetic loser whose life is going nowhere, mine shouldn't go anywhere either. That is wildly unfair. She sobbed, trying to play the victim. I am your mother. I carried you. I was just trying to teach you some desperately needed humility. By trying to destroy my livelihood? That's not teaching humility, Mom. That is psychotic sabotage. You know what? We are completely done. Do not ever call me again. Do not ever contact my workplace again. Do not show up at my house. You are dead to me. We are done. You cannot speak to me that way. I am your mother. I demand respect. And you're supposed to be proud of your son when he succeeds, not try to tear him down because it hurts your favorite pet's feelings. Lose my number. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. I had never spoken to my parents like that in my entire life. I had never stood up to them so aggressively. But a line had been crossed that could never, ever be uncrossed. My phone immediately started ringing. My mom. I declined it. Then my dad. Declined. Then my mom again. Declined. Then the text messages started flooding in. Mom, you are being incredibly dramatic and ridiculous. Call me back right this second so we can discuss this like rational adults. Dad, your mother is hyperventilating and crying uncontrollably on the kitchen floor. This is absolutely no way to treat the woman who gave you life. Call and apologize immediately. Leo, dude, what the hell did you say to Mom? She's a wreck. You're such a selfish prick. Stop acting like you're better than us. I blocked all 3 of their numbers. Without hesitation, just blocked. Blocked. The rest of that week was a tense blur. I kept expecting my mom to physically show up at my office lobby and make a scene, or call David again, but nothing happened. I stayed hyper-focused on work, deploying my projects flawlessly, and tried to push the insane betrayal out of my mind. Friday afternoon, Uncle Marcus called me. We had exchanged numbers a few months back when he wanted some advice on upgrading his home network. Hey, kid, got a minute? He asked, his tone very serious. Yeah, what's up? I heard about what happened with your mom calling your VP. Your dad called me last night crying about it, trying to get me to intervene. Oh, fantastic. So the whole family knows now. Just me and Helen, Marcus said. And for what it's worth, I told your dad that what your mom did was completely, unforgivably out of line. Like, psycho ward level over the line. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Thank you. I'm so glad someone in this family isn't completely insane. I tried talking sense into them, Marcus continued, sighing. I told them they were being absolutely ridiculous about this whole bizarre dynamic with you and Leo. Your mom just kept screaming that you had become an arrogant monster and needed to be brought down to reality. Your dad backed her up completely. It was honestly disturbing to listen to. That has been my entire life for the past 29 years, Uncle Marcus, I said exhaustedly. Well, I wanted you to know that Helen and I do not see it that way. We think you have done an incredible, amazing job building your life from scratch. We are incredibly proud of you, even if your parents are too blinded by their obsession with Leo to see it. I felt a massive lump form in my throat. I really appreciate that, Marcus, more than you know. And between you and me, Marcus said, lowering his voice, Leo needs a massive reality check. The kid is 26 years old, living at home, with no real job, no ambition, and no skills. Your parents aren't doing him any favors by coddling his laziness. They are ruining him. Try telling them that, I scoffed. I have, multiple times. They absolutely refuse to hear it. They have deeply convinced themselves that Leo is a misunderstood genius who is going to figure things out any day now and become a millionaire, and that you are just temporarily ahead of him. It's clinical delusion. We talked for a few more minutes, and hanging up, I felt marginally better. At least I wasn't the crazy one, but my relief was incredibly short-lived. Monday morning, I walked into work feeling refreshed. But before I even made it to my desk, David intercepted me in the hallway. His face was grim. We need to go to HR. Right now, he said quietly. That same horrible stomach drop sensation hit me, tenfold. Did she call again? I asked as we walked quickly toward the elevators. Worse. Our director of human resources, Sarah, received a massive email from her on Friday night, right after business hours. You have got to be absolutely kidding me. I deeply wish I was, David said, pressing the elevator button. HR forwarded it to me over the weekend. It is a 3-page, single-spaced document detailing severe, supposedly documented accusations about your behavior. She claims you are a corporate fraud who has been actively manipulating management, stealing code from junior developers, and she even named specific projects you've worked on. How does she know my projects? She must have stalked your LinkedIn profile and weaponized the descriptions you posted, David said. It is honestly one of the most unhinged things I have seen in my 20 years in corporate management, but because it was submitted formally in writing to HR, it triggered an automatic, mandatory investigation. I spent my entire weekend pulling your Git logs, your Jira tickets, compiling all the positive feedback from your team, and documenting every single line of code you've written for the past year to prove she's lying. David, I am so incredibly sorry. This is a nightmare. It's not your fault, but we have to play the corporate game now to protect you. We walked into Sarah's office. Sarah, the HR director, was a very sharp, no-nonsense woman. She motioned for me to sit down. She had a thick manila folder on her desk. "Let's get right to it," Sarah said, folding her hands. "I am fully aware of the family dynamic at play here, as David briefed me. However, I need to formally ask you, is there any truth, even a fraction of a percent, to the claims made in this email by your mother?" "Absolutely none," I said firmly, looking her dead in the eye. "Every single accusation is a complete and utter fabrication designed maliciously to ruin my career." Sarah nodded slowly. She opened the folder and slid a printed copy of the email across the desk. I read it, and my blood ran ice cold. It was worse than David described. My mother had written an elaborate, corporate-sounding hit piece. She claimed I had manipulated the Q3 logistics overhaul project by stealing the architecture from a junior analyst who was too afraid to speak up. She claimed I was verbally abusive in meetings. She claimed I had a severe drinking problem that affected my work. It was so detailed, so vicious, and so calculated that I felt physically nauseous reading it. "This is insane," I whispered. "She doesn't even know what Q3 logistics means." "We know," Sarah said gently. "David spent the weekend providing me with undeniable, time-stamped proof that you were the sole architect of that project. We also discreetly interviewed 3 of your direct reports this morning before you arrived. They had nothing but glowing, exceptional praise for your leadership and character. They explicitly denied any harassment or toxic behavior. So, what happens now?" I asked, feeling completely drained. "You are fully cleared. The investigation is officially closed as baseless," Sarah said, closing the folder. "However, I am having our legal department draft a formal cease and desist letter. It will be sent via certified mail to your mother today. It will explicitly state that her claims have been investigated and proven false, and that any further contact with this company, its employees, or its clients will result in immediate legal action for defamation and harassment." I let out a massive sigh of relief, sinking into the chair. "Thank you, Sarah." "Thank you, David. I am so sorry you had to waste company time on my psychotic family. Family dynamics can be tragic," Sarah said sympathetically. "You are an exceptional employee, don't let her break you." I left the HR office feeling validated, but completely hollowed out. My own mother had spent hours drafting a weaponized email to destroy me. That evening, as I was cooking dinner in my house, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Hello? Is this going to be your permanent response to everything? Just ignoring your family and pretending we don't exist?" It was my dad, calling from a burner phone or a friend's phone since I had blocked his cell. "I am not pretending you don't exist," I said coldly. "I am actively cutting contact with toxic people who tried to maliciously sabotage my career. Your mother made a small mistake." My dad pleaded, his voice desperate. She was highly emotional, she was upset about Leo's depression, and she just snapped. She didn't mean most of what she wrote. She wrote 3 pages of calculated, weaponized lies to my HR department. "Dad, 3 pages. She looked up my LinkedIn, found my projects, and fabricated a story to get me fired for fraud. That is not emotional, that is a premeditated assassination of my character. She is incredibly apologetic now," Dad lied. "She realizes she went too far, she's crying. Good for her. It still doesn't change a damn thing. You are really going to completely cut off your entire family over this?" he yelled, his temper finally flaring. "Over your mother trying to teach you a harsh lesson about humility? Trying to get me fired and sued for fraud isn't teaching humility, Dad, it's sabotage. And yes, I am absolutely cutting off the people who view my hard-earned success as a disease that needs to be cured. Leo is having a really, really hard time with all of this," Dad said, wildly changing tactics. "He feels like you have completely abandoned the family. His depression is spiking." I actually laughed. "Leo is having a hard time? Leo, who lives completely rent-free in your house at age 26, works 12 hours a week, and plays video games all night? That Leo? He is going through a very sensitive transition period. He has been going through a transition period for 8 years, Dad," I yelled back. "At some point, it's not a transition. It's just his pathetic life, and that is not my problem. You used to care about this family," Dad said quietly, trying to guilt-trip me. "I still care about the family members who are actually happy for my success instead of trying to destroy it. Which, at this point, is literally just Uncle Marcus. You are being incredibly selfish, cruel, and arrogant. I am being successful, and it makes you violently uncomfortable. Those are not the same thing." I hung up the phone and blocked that number, too. Update 1. The next few months were blissfully, wonderfully quiet. No insane calls from my parents, no psychotic emails to my HR department, no unexpected driveway ambushes. I threw myself entirely into my new manager role. I excelled at my job, got a massive performance bonus, and started actually enjoying my life without the constant, suffocating undercurrent of my family's toxic drama. I started dating a wonderful woman named Claire, who brought immense peace into my life. Then, Uncle Marcus called again with an update. "Hey, kid. Just wanted to give you the latest scoop on the insane asylum," he said. "Do I even want to hear this?" I asked, pouring myself a glass of wine. "Probably not, but you need to know what they're saying. Your mom has been going on a massive smear campaign. She's telling the entire extended family that you violently cut off the family for absolutely no reason. She's playing the ultimate victim. She says you became corrupted by corporate greed, rejected her loving guidance, and now you refuse to speak to her. Her loving guidance being trying to get me fired for corporate fraud. Oh, she is conveniently leaving that part completely out." Marcus laughed dryly. "She's spinning it like she gave you some gentle, constructive feedback about being more humble, and you flew into a narcissistic rage and cut everyone off. Of course she is. Your dad is backing her up 100%. And Leo is telling all the cousins that you are secretly violently jealous of his deep emotional bond with your parents, and that's why you stopped coming around. It's incredibly twisted. Let them spin it however they want," I said, taking a sip of wine. "The people who matter know the absolute truth." "That's exactly what I told Helen," Marcus said. "We are not buying a single word of their garbage. Helen actually cornered your mom at a family BBQ last week and told her off in front of everyone. She told your mom that what she did to your career was unforgivable, psychotic, and that you had every right to never speak to them again. Your mom completely lost her mind and locked herself in the bathroom crying." "I bet she did. Just wanted you to know that you have fierce support here," Marcus said. "About 4 months after I cut contact, I went to my mailbox and found a thick envelope. It was physical mail, not an email. It was from my mother, written in her incredibly distinctive, loopy cursive handwriting. I stood in my kitchen, debating whether to just shred it without opening it. But morbid curiosity won out. I sliced it open. The letter was 5 pages long, front and back. It was 5 pages of pure, unadulterated, narcissistic delusion. My mother spent the entire letter explaining in excruciating detail how deeply hurt she was by my behavior. She wrote about how she had only been trying to help me stay grounded and protect my soul from corporate arrogance. She wrote about how cutting off the family was cruel, abusive, and completely unnecessary. She wrote about how much they all missed me, how Leo was struggling deeply with my absence, and how the family dynamic was shattered because of my stubbornness. Nowhere in those 5 pages did she apologize for calling my vice president. Nowhere did she acknowledge the 3-page HR email filled with lies. Nowhere did she take a single ounce of responsibility for trying to ruin my life. Instead, the absolute kicker was the final paragraph. She suggested that if I apologized for my dramatic overreaction, and promised to be significantly more considerate of Leo's delicate feelings going forward, she would graciously forgive me, and we could move past this unfortunate misunderstanding and be a happy family again. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't having a stroke. She wanted me to apologize to her. I took a photo of the letter, sent it to Uncle Marcus with the caption, "Are you seeing this level of delusion?" He called me laughing so hard he was wheezing. "Is she completely off her medication? She wants you to apologize for her trying to get you fired?" "Apparently, I overreacted to her corporate sabotage," I said, "and if I just admit I'm a monster and promise to hide my success better, she'll forgive me." "Do absolutely nothing," Marcus ordered. "Do not respond. Do not acknowledge it. She does not get to dictate the terms of reality." I threw the letter straight into the garbage disposal and turned it on. A year after cutting contact, I got a wedding invitation from a cousin on my dad's side. Uncle Marcus warned me that my parents and Leo would definitely be there. I RSVP'd yes and brought Claire as my +1. I wasn't going to let them run me out of my own extended family. The wedding was incredibly tense. My parents were sitting in the second pew of the church, with Leo slouched aggressively between them, looking miserable in an ill-fitting suit. My mom spotted me walking in with Claire. Her face went stark white, and she started whispering frantically to my dad. I just gave them a blank nod and found seats on the complete opposite side of the church. At the reception, I made my rounds, chatting with aunts, uncles, and cousins. Multiple people asked how my career was going. I kept my answers very brief, polite, and honest. Work was amazing. Life was great. My mom was glaring daggers at me from across the ballroom all night. About 2 hours into the reception, I was waiting at the bar for drinks when my mom suddenly appeared right next to me, physically blocking my path back to the tables. "Can we talk right now?" she demanded, her breath smelling heavily of white wine. "There is absolutely nothing to talk about," I said calmly, not breaking eye contact with the bartender. "You cannot avoid me forever. I am your mother. I'm not avoiding you. I am simply not having a conversation about reconciliation until you actually admit what you did and apologize for trying to destroy my career. I sent you a 5-page letter pouring my heart out," she hissed. "That letter asked me to apologize to you. That is not an apology. That is delusion." Her face flushed violently red. "You are being incredibly unreasonable. I made one tiny mistake out of love. Calling my VP was one mistake. Writing a 3-page manifesto of lies to my HR department was a second, massive, calculated mistake. That wasn't love, that was sabotage. I was trying to help you, she cried, drawing the attention of nearby guests. You were becoming an arrogant monster, someone needed to humble you before you ruined your life. And there it is, I said, grabbing my drinks. You still truly believe you were right to try and get me fired. Until that fundamentally changes, you do not exist to me. I walked away, leaving her standing at the bar with her mouth hanging open. She didn't approach me for the rest of the night, but I saw her crying hysterically at her table while my dad awkwardly rubbed her back. Leo got completely drunk, tried to make a passive-aggressive toast about family loyalty that the DJ abruptly cut off, and they left the wedding early in disgrace. The atmosphere immediately improved once they were gone. Update 2. It has now been 2 full years since I cut contact with my parents and Leo. I am now 31 years old. 6 months ago, I achieved something I never thought possible this early in my career. I was promoted to Director of Analytics. My salary skyrocketed to $185,000 a year, plus massive equity in the company. I manage a department of 30 people. I sold my first house, took the massive equity I had built, and bought a stunning, modern home in Bellevue. I still drive the BMW, but I bought Claire an SUV when we officially got engaged last month. Life is genuinely, unbelievably good. But the absolute craziest twist to this entire saga came to light a few weeks ago, courtesy of Uncle Marcus. Marcus called me on a Sunday morning. Are you sitting down? Always. What did they do now? I finally found out the real story behind that HR email your mom sent 2 years ago, Marcus said, his voice laced with disgust. Leo got drunk at a cousin's birthday party last night and started bragging. Kid, your mom didn't write that email. I froze. What do you mean? Your mom is terrible with computers, you know that. She didn't know how to look up your LinkedIn, and she definitely didn't know corporate HR jargon. Leo did it. Leo used his communications degree skills to draft that entire 3-page hit piece. He looked up your projects, he fabricated the harassment claims. He typed the whole thing up, and your mom just let him send it from her email account so it would look like a concerned parent instead of a jealous brother. My jaw unhinged. The sheer, malicious betrayal of it all washed over me. Leo had actively orchestrated the entire assassination attempt on my career because he couldn't stand that I was doing better than him. Are you serious? I whispered. Dead serious. He was bragging about how he almost took you down a peg, and how smart he was for using HR buzzwords to trigger an investigation. Helen overheard him and practically dragged him out of the house by his ear. Wow, I breathed. Just, wow. But here is the absolute best part, Marcus said, his tone shifting to pure vindication. Karma has completely caught up to them. You know how your parents were covering Leo's rent for that apartment? Yeah? Well, Leo tried to start a lifestyle clothing brand last year. He convinced your parents to take out a massive home equity line of credit HELOC on their house to fund his brilliant business venture. They gave him nearly $100,000. He completely blew it. Bought expensive inventory nobody wanted, blew money on lavish marketing parties for his friends, and the business went totally bankrupt in 8 months. You're kidding? Nope. And because interest rates spiked, your parents are drowning in the HELOC payments. They literally cannot afford their mortgage anymore. They had to put your childhood home on the market last week. They are downsizing to a tiny 2-bedroom condo. And Leo? Leo got evicted from his apartment because your parents couldn't pay his rent anymore. He had to move back in with them. He is currently 28 years old, completely unemployed, living in a cramped condo with his broke parents, with absolutely zero prospects. I sat back in my plush home office chair, looking out the window at my beautiful backyard in Bellevue. My parents had tried to stop me from succeeding. They had demanded I hide my accomplishments, and when I refused, they conspired with my deeply jealous brother to actively sabotage my career and ruin my life. And despite all of that, despite their absolute worst, most toxic efforts, I had succeeded anyway. I thrived. I built a beautiful life, found an amazing fiancé, and reached a level of financial security they could never dream of. Meanwhile, their blind, obsessive favoritism and enabling of their golden child had literally cost them their home, their retirement, and their eldest son. I didn't gloat. I didn't call them to rub it in. I simply thanked Uncle Marcus for the update, hung up the phone, and went back to planning my wedding with Claire, a wedding they will absolutely not be invited to.